Welcome to the Life Makeovers podcast. My name is Cindy D. Whitmer, and I am the Midlife Makeover Coach, helping you turn your midlife into your best life, one step at a time. Through powerful conversations, my own midlife roller coaster story, and over 3 decades of helping people transform their lives through counseling and coaching, I am on a mission to help you create your own definition of success and happiness. Thank you for being here. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Life Makeovers podcast. Thank you so much for being with me today. So there's a new documentary out about Martha Stewart. Have you seen it yet? It's on Netflix. I think it's just called Martha, if I remember correctly. And I had an evening where I had some time recently, and I thought, I'm gonna watch that. I haven't followed Martha Stewart. I'm aware of her. I think saw one of her shows once and glanced at a couple of her magazines over the years, but I haven't been like a consistent follower or watcher of her work or interviews or anything. So my only claim to knowing her in any depth is having watched this 2-hour documentary that's just out on Netflix. And it was fascinating to me. Of course, I have a mental health background. I'm a coach. I work with women all the time. This is what I do. And it's always just amazing to hear the backstory and the ongoing saga of a woman's life and how her journey has evolved over time, space, and adventures and pivots and all kinds of things. So anyway, just to give you sort of a synopsis of her life based on the documentary, in case you haven't seen it or you don't know, it sounded like her childhood was pretty tough, that she had a pretty tough dad who expected perfection and was punitive if people didn't get it right, if the kids didn't get things right. And so I think she started off, in not a very nurturing environment, but more produce, be perfect, and that kind of thing. And then they were so busy, of course, too, with a big family and everything, that there wasn't a lot of time for nurturing. And then she grew up pretty quickly. As a young adult, she met the man that she married and was married to for quite some time, and found herself pregnant pretty quickly, too. And it sounded like she had quite a tug between, feeling like, oh, I've got this daughter, I need to mother her, but really not wanting to spend all day doing that. She had business goals, she had ambitions, she had things on her mind to do, and having a little baby was getting in the way, really, I think, for her. And so they demonstrated that struggle a bit in the documentary. And she had some indiscretions in her first marriage, which she minimized in the documentary. And her husband also had affairs and things. And when I found her talking about any pain points in her life, that she was very stoic, very flat, because the documentary was structured such that she was sitting and sort of being interviewed and prompted to talk about different parts of her life. And then they'd show, video and other things about those stories of her life and media coverage and things of her life. But when she was talking, I found her very flat, very stoic, or very guarded. I'm not sure what all was happening for her, if she was very guarded or if she just does not have a lot of affect, but it was profound. It was really obvious. So anyway, the Martha Stewart story is an empowerment story for sure, going from, starting out with nothing, so to speak, and building this billionaire, business. And then, of course, getting arrested and charged with a crime and going to jail for 5 months, and then the business just plummeting through that whole situation. And then the story of her getting out of jail and getting back into life and sort of reinventing herself and building her wealth and impact again, doing things that she loved. It sounds like she's a very honest person in that in her dealings with people. So I have a feeling based on this that if you work for Martha Stewart, you're going to get the truth about what she thinks of your work. She's going to be straightforward, direct, and want you to do things right, which of course was, I think, how her father approached her as she was growing up. Very strong, strong personality. And again, she minimized her quote unquote role in her arrest, her crime, and really blamed other people, that they made a big deal out of nothing and those kinds of things. And just never really heard her take a lot of responsibility for the demise of her marriage or the other long-term relationship she had with another guy. But she did take credit for her successes, of course, because she is the founder, owner, creator, the whole shebang of her business. Definitely a fighter, definitely determined, knows what she wants and really goes for it. And so she even, I read some information of her being interviewed after the documentary came out, and she was really criticizing it, sharing things she did not like about it, things she wished would have been mentioned about her life that was not, like her grandchildren or godchildren. She felt the focus was too much on her time in jail and that whole chapter in her life. Apparently, she liked the first half of the documentary and then thought it was too focused. The next part was too focused on all of that. So other successes and sweet parts of her life were left out. And she also, there was some footage of her in her own garden at home and working in the garden and checking things over in the garden and talking to staff in the garden. She's walking through it and she's kind of got this little limp going on, which I didn't think was profound or anything. I thought she looked great out there, amazing. She's in her 80s, for heaven's sakes. And I thought she looked really good and strong and steady. But she didn't like how she looked and felt like she looked like an old lady, a crippled old lady. And so, she's hard on herself too, right? It sounds like pretty hard on herself, hard on those around her. Perfectionism was a definite theme of this documentary and so forth. So why am I sharing all of this? Well, I'm always looking for powerful examples of women who appear to not let age become a factor in stopping them, who have lived through some pretty difficult circumstances and come out the other side successfully or happily or whatever. And to me, she's an example of this in many, many ways. So what the 5 lessons that I think stood out most for me from watching this, getting to know her a little bit more deeply, is number 1, we learn early in life how to survive. We do learn this early in life. Most of us are not raised by people who have had, a really healthy, nurturing environment necessarily, because of course our parents weren't either. There was a whole other approach. Not that people were necessarily mean or abusive, but a lot of times people didn't know more of what we know now about how to be nurturing and healthy in relationships. And so we grow up learning how to survive. And even if home life was okay, then there was the whole school dynamic or wherever else you were as you were growing up that could have involved bullies or a very critical teacher or who knows, whatever. Anyway, we learn young, as little Martha did, that she better, straighten up, do what's right, be as perfect as possible, or life would be difficult. And I think she took that in on a really deep level, whether she knew it or not, and strove for perfection in her life and expected a lot of that out of other people. Now, this is just my personal assessment of a 2 hour documentary. So, some of you maybe have followed her for decades and experience her very differently. So, but just for my purposes and purposes of giving you some value today, these are my impressions. Number two, we must do what we love. Like, we all are driven with desires implanted in us, things that bring us joy, things we think are valuable or significant. And it's so important to let us do those things. When she had the baby whom she loved, but she wanted to still express this whole other part of herself, this creative part of herself that wanted to impact other people with creating beautiful home environments or cooking delicious meals or creating traditions in their home and with their families and so forth, and the catering business and all these things. And she just needed to let herself do it, instead of thinking she had to, be with her little baby all day long or all the time or whatever, and deny herself that. So we must do what we love. Number three, we can get through anything. If anybody in their 80s are still around, one of the things they've learned is they can get through anything. They've been through so much, and she was no exception. She went through a lot of heartache in her life, a lot of heartache as a kid. And then, of course, her husband's affairs and the demise of that marriage. All the while, the whole world was watching her build this business and so forth. And she was trying to, keep up that image of being the happy wife at home, doing her creative things. And at the same time, a divorce was in the process, and, all that. And then, of course, later in her life, she had the whole stock, exchange thing she did, and it was tipped off supposedly, and then was turned into a whole couple of years of trial and court and jail and that whole thing. And then her business just tanked, of course, from that whole humiliation, embarrassment, mistake, whatever we want to call it. And she got through that and came back, and she's, on fire again in her life. She was just not that long ago the oldest person on the cover of, I think it was the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition, in her 80s. I mean, wow. And you've seen her do other things, her show with Snoop Dogg and all kinds of things. So you can get through anything, is what we've learned from Martha, right? Number four, you can evolve and change. Like, her business evolved, right? It evolved as her life evolved. It evolved as she got interested in other things, or as her audience, grew around what she was offering and took different forms of expression. So she had a catering business, and she taught about decor, and of course food, but decor. She had a magazine. Several magazines, actually. I thought there was just the one, Martha Stewart Living, but there were several different kinds of magazines from her company. She had the whole line of bedding and different things through Kmart when that was around. She was on television, had TV shows of different kinds over the years. And, so there was all this variety. She kept evolving and changing and mixing with different companies and people. And ways of expressing her passions and so forth. And so really what some say, we're either growing or evolving or we're dying. So she's definitely an example of someone who's evolved and changed over the years. And honestly, even when she was in jail, they highlighted a little bit of that time there and how she, bonded with some of the other women and taught some little classes and things there, even in there, to help them improve their lives. And number 5, age does not have to stop you. I love that. I love that she's in her 80s and she's still going strong. She's out there in her garden and doing things, and she's teaching people things, still has relevance and intelligence and a passion to share with the world. And she's in her 80s. I mean, I love that. So those of you who are out there like me in your 40s or your 50s or your 60s, I'm 57, but those of you that are out there in kind of what we call the midlife years, or adulthood too, as some people say, and you think you're done, you're washed up, there's nothing you can do, or your life's just all humdrum till the end now, that that doesn't have to be true at all. Not true at all. And look, I know most of you aren't billionaires who've built an industry out there. Maybe none of you are, but you do have your corner of the world, whatever size, shape it is. And you do have your own gifts and talents, whatever they are. And you do have your own personality, your history, things that bring you joy, and you can create a wonderful life with just where you are and who you are and what you have right this minute. So if you think any differently than that, please look to the Marthas of the world who have changed and evolved and grown over time and really overcome some pretty dramatic circumstances. Now, a bonus here that I want to point out about this, I think I've already said it, that I noticed more than once in this documentary that she did not appear, at least in the footage they put in the documentary, to take much responsibility in her life for some of the things that were very difficult. For example, the demise of her marriage. And then she even talked about a couple little indiscretions, but she minimized them a lot, said they were no big deal. But then, of course, he had affairs and it was disastrous, right? And then she was in a long-term relationship with another man who never visited her in jail, but yet sent his private jet to fly her home when she got released, but then shortly after that announced to her that he was marrying some other woman. And all the while she's like avoiding reality, right? She's denying reality, avoiding reality, not looking long and hard at herself or her life to really deal with things. And so it doesn't help us, right? It doesn't help us to avoid or deny our realities. So the first step in my midlife makeover method that I teach in my coaching programs, it's in my book, The Midlife Makeover Method, is waking up. Waking up. And that's where we take a good, long, hard look at how we're showing up in our lives and what's working and what's not. The results of your life right now, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, in my own life, has to do with me. And it has to do with you. Your life has to do with you. And so we want to all, if there's something you're unsatisfied around, we've all got to wake up and go, okay, what's working? What's not working? What am I not seeing here? What do I need to see differently so I can act differently to get myself more down a path that I want to go? So those are the questions, right? Because if you just you do the ostrich method, I call it, you stick your head in the sand and you don't pay attention, you don't look at what's going on in your life, you don't listen to what's going on in your life, you avoid the whole thing, which I think maybe Martha did do some of that in her life, it seemed, then you can't get anywhere. You can't help any situation to change it in a way that's really going to be impactful. I'd like you to take the lessons that, or I'd like to suggest that you take the lessons I learned from watching Martha's documentary. Maybe go watch it yourself if you have time and interest, and take a deeper look yourself. But take these lessons that we can learn from an amazing, incredible, powerful, creative, intelligent person and learn. Let us learn. How do we want to be like Martha Stewart? And how do we not want to be like Martha Stewart? And what can we take from her life journey and life wisdom to make our own even better? Okay, so I would love, if I could ask Martha Stewart one question, it would be, how much do you love yourself, Martha? How much? Because I found it really hard to tell while I was watching the documentary. I really did. I was curious how much self-love was really there. Because in some ways, it seems like there would be a lot because she's reached such incredible success in a lot of ways. But in other ways, it's like, well, she picked men, for example, that did not ultimately treat her well. And she was, she grew up with some pretty harsh circumstances that can kind of make it hard to develop that healthy self-love. And so I would love to know where she would believe she lands with that. So let's keep tabs on our own self-love. How much do you love yourself? And how much, if you aren't feeling on a scale of 0 to 10, if you're any less than a 10 in your self-love for you, I want you to go and watch my free masterclass called How to Love Yourself Fully and Live on Your Terms in Midlife Without Guilt. Okay? It's a free class. It's 1 hour. I've just put this thing together for you, and I'd love to know what you think of it. So please go to cindydwhitmer.com/love yourself and sign up and pick the time that works best for you and take a look at that class. Please watch all the way to the end and see what else I have to offer you from there. And let me know what you think of it. Definitely email me. Go to my website, cindydwhitmer.com, and contact me. Let me know what you think of the class. Let me know how you're doing in your own journey of self-love. And I will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Life Makeovers podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast with those that you think would also benefit from what we're doing here. And I will talk to you again soon.